Amanda's heart pounded as she walked into the sleek glass building, its shiny exterior reflecting the early morning sun. She had dreamed of this moment her entire life. The bright lights, the glitz, the glamour. She was finally here. She'd made it. She passed the glossy posters of radiant women on the walls, faces she had seen on billboards, in magazines, on runways, a future she had imagined for herself, right within her grasp. The receptionist smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She handed Amanda a form to fill out, and something in her smile made Amanda pause. Something was off, but she shook it off. She was just being nervous. It was a dream come true, after all. The woman at the desk motioned her to the elevator, where the doors opened without a word. Amanda stepped inside, the polished metal reflecting her uncertain smile as the elevator shot upwards. The doors opened to a bright, sleek floor. Another woman was waiting, clipboard in hand, dressed in a way that made her look far too serious for someone in the modelling world. The woman led her through the halls, and Amanda barely noticed the soft click of her heels echoing through the empty space. "I'm Susan," the woman said, her voice clipped. "We've been following your progress closely, Amanda. We're impressed." Her eyes were unreadable. "You're going to do well here." Amanda nodded, trying to push the rising nerves down her throat. She smiled, despite herself, at the familiar name on the walls. The agency was well known. Famous. "Great," Amanda said, her voice shaky as she swallowed. "I've always dreamed of this." They stopped in front of a sleek glass door that led to a meeting room, far more luxurious than she expected for an agency just getting started. She could already smell the faint trace of expensive perfume mixed with coffee. Behind the desk sat a man, tall, dark hair neatly combed, dressed in an immaculate suit. His eyes were sharp, his smile a little too smooth. "Sit down, Amanda," he said, his voice a low, soothing hum. She did as she was told, unable to tear her eyes away from him. "We've got big plans for you," he continued, fingers tapping against the desk, watching her intently. "But first, we need to see if you're ready. Can't have anything holding you back, can we?" He let out a small chuckle. Amanda forced a laugh, unsure of what he meant. He stood and walked towards her, stopping just short of her chair. "There's a lot to offer," he murmured, eyes gleaming with something she couldn't quite place. "But not everyone's made for this business, you know what I mean?" Amanda swallowed, nodding quickly. She didn't want to seem out of place. She'd dreamed of this for years, after all. Then the questions started. Personal ones, uncomfortable ones, about her family, her relationships, her past. Things that shouldn't matter in this business. But somehow they did. The questions began to blur together, and the bright lights above her seemed to dim. She couldn't put her finger on it, but a sinking feeling was creeping up her spine. By the end of the meeting, she was exhausted. "We'll call you with the details soon," the man said, his smile still in place. But Amanda felt something was wrong. The excitement from earlier was gone, replaced by unease. The door clicked shut behind her, and she was alone in the empty corridor again, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound. Amanda thought she was on top of the world. The city felt alive, buzzing with possibilities. She'd landed a spot at one of the most prestigious modelling agencies, and her dreams were right there, just out of reach. She could almost taste it. The runway, the photo shoots, the fame. But as the days passed, the shimmer of that dream started to fade. It began with the long hours, the shoots that seemed to drag on forever, the demands that never stopped. At first, she pushed through, telling herself it was part of the deal. This is what it takes, she thought. This is the price of success. But the price was becoming too high. She noticed the changes in herself, the exhaustion that never went away, the constant feeling that something was wrong, like a shadow always at the edge of her vision, just out of reach but always there. And then there were the clients. They weren't like the ones she'd imagined in her head. the ones who were supposed to admire her beauty and talent. No, these men didn't care about her career. They cared about her body, her presence, her submission. She tried to brush it off, tell herself she was just being paranoid. It was only a few more jobs, they said, a few more clients to impress. But the work wasn't what she thought it would be. The late-night calls from the agency, the strange meetings in empty hotel rooms, the promises of big opportunities, if only she could be more flexible with her time. At first, she told herself it was just part of the process. Every model had to do it. They all had to pay their dues. But soon, the truth became undeniable. She wasn't just working anymore. She was being used. The agency didn't care about her career. They cared about controlling her. One night, after another exhausting shoot, she was called into the office again. The man, his name still a blur, was waiting for her. His sharp smile didn't reach his eyes, and the coldness in his voice sent a chill down her spine. "You've been good," he said, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. "But I think it's time to take things to the next level." She stared at him, trying to hide the panic rising in her chest. The words he spoke were laced with something darker. She could feel it. "Next level?" she asked, her voice shaking. He leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're ready, Amanda. Ready to make a lot more money. Ready to make a name for yourself. But you have to give a little more of yourself first." A knot twisted in her stomach. She wanted to run, wanted to scream, but her legs felt heavy as if the floor had become an anchor. "This is how it works," he continued, his smile widening. "You do what we say, and you get the rewards. You don't. Well, then you don't. Simple as that." Her heart beat faster. The words were clear now. She wasn't just a model. She was a tool, a piece in their game. Amanda fought to keep her voice steady. "I'm not doing that," she said, her throat tight. The man's smile didn't falter. "You don't have a choice," he said, his tone cold, final. "You're in it now." She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she lay in the small, dim-lit apartment the agency has given to her, the walls closing in. Every sound felt louder, sharper. The creak of the floorboards, the faint hum of the city outside, the beating of her heart in her ears. Trapped. That's what she was. The agency had taken her passport. Her phone activities was monitored. They controlled her every move now. She had nothing left. The glossy magazines, the high-fashion world, none of it mattered anymore. The promises of fame and fortune had turned into chains. Amanda's life had become a blur of bright lights and dark corners. At first, it was easy to pretend she was still in control. After all, she was doing what she had always dreamed of. The shoots, the parties, the meetings. She had to remind herself constantly, this is normal. This is the price of fame. But the moments of clarity, the fleeting whispers of doubt, were growing more frequent. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The long hours, the late-night calls, the men with hungry eyes who seemed to look past her as if she were nothing but a commodity. But it wasn't just the men. It was the agency, too. They demanded more, always more. She was told when to eat, when to sleep, when to smile. The photographers pushed her past her limits, telling her to look a certain way, act a certain way. Every glance was dissected, every step scrutinized. Amanda used to love her reflection. She would stand in front of the mirror and marvel at the person she was becoming. But now, the woman staring back at her felt wrong. Her eyes were dull, no longer sparkling with hope but clouded with exhaustion. Her skin was pale, her cheeks hollow, her body aching, stiff from hours of shooting, posing, smiling, always smiling. The food was sparse, the water even less. "You need to stay lean," they told her. "A few pounds won't hurt. You can always gain it later." So she skipped meals. She drank less. She could feel the constant gnawing hunger, the dry mouth, the dizziness that came with it. But she ignored it. She kept pushing forward. She had to. It wasn't just the physical strain. It was the slow, insidious way they took control of her mind. They isolated her, piece by piece, until she no longer knew who she was. She never went out anymore. She was always on call. If she was lucky, they'd let her sleep for a few hours. But there was always something more to be done. A new meeting, a new client, a new shoot. Always something that pulled her deeper into the web until there was no escape. The walls of her apartment felt like they were closing in. The air in the small room was thick, suffocating. She couldn't even remember the last time she'd been outside, felt the sun on her skin, heard the sounds of the city. She had become a prisoner of the very dream she had fought so hard to make come true. Her phone buzzed in the middle of the night, a message flashing across the screen. "We need you to be at the hotel in 2 hours. The client wants a private session. Don't be late." Her stomach twisted as she stared at the words. She had become a puppet, her strings pulled by the agency, by men who saw her as nothing more than a body to use. The idea of refusing no longer seemed possible. She didn't have the power to say no. The consequences were too great. Her passport was gone. Her phone was being monitored. Her money, if she even had any left, was under the agency's control. She had no way out. The first time the client had come to her apartment, Amanda had tried to protest. She had said no, not in the way they wanted, but the words had barely left her mouth before she was hushed, pushed aside, told that this was part of the deal. The money, the fame, the life she had dreamed of, it all depended on her cooperation. That night she locked herself in the bathroom, staring at the woman in the mirror, tears streaming down her face. She cried. For the girl she had been, the one with ambition and dreams, seemed so far away, a distant memory. She had become something else, someone else. Her body had been taken. Her spirit was next. But she won't allow it. Never. At first, Amanda thought she had found a place of belonging. The other models seemed like friends, like sisters bound by the same dream. The long days in the studio were filled with shared stories of auditions, of flights to glamorous cities, of agents promising to make them stars. There was Emily, the quiet one, with eyes that never seemed to fully blink, and Sophie, the loud one, always on her phone, laughing too loudly, always telling everyone how she was this close to signing a deal with a top designer. Amanda had learned to smile at the little victories, to cheer along with the rest of them when someone got a gig. But as the days dragged on, she started to notice the crack. One afternoon, Amanda sat in a waiting room with Emily. The walls were lined with glossy magazine covers, faces of women who seemed to glow with confidence. Amanda had always wanted to be one of them, to see her face on those covers. But the longer she stayed, the less she saw herself as one of them. "Did you hear?" Emily whispered, leaning in, her voice tight with something Amanda couldn't place. "Lena's out. They dropped her. They said she wasn't what they wanted." Emily's fingers twitched, gripping her phone too tightly, as though she were holding onto a lifeline. Amanda blinked. "What do you mean?" She was so beautiful. "Doesn't matter," Emily said flatly. "They want something different now, something fresher." Her lips curled into something like a sneer, her voice tinged with bitterness. "It's not about beauty anymore. It's about whatever keeps them interested." Amanda didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded, pretending to be absorbed in her phone. But a weight settled over her. She could feel it, the fear, in the way Emily spoke, in the silence that followed Lena's name. Days blurred together, and the camaraderie began to fray. Emily's sharp comments started to feel more pointed, more frequent. The other girls noticed it too, though they didn't say anything. They just looked away. Sophie, the one who had always been the life of the party, now avoided Amanda whenever they crossed paths. The change was subtle at first, Sophie laughing a little less, glancing at Amanda's outfits with a slight narrowing of her eyes. Amanda found herself standing alone more often in the dressing room, her back to the mirror, brushing out her hair, trying to avoid the way their whispers curled around her. It wasn't until Sophie snapped at her that Amanda realized how deep the rift had gone. "You think you're something special?" Sophie's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. Amanda, startled, turned to face her, but Sophie was already looking past her, adjusting her dress in front of the mirror. "You're nothing but another face in a crowd, Amanda. You think they care about you? About any of us?" Her words were low, bitter, but laced with something Amanda could never name. Jealousy. Fear. I don't understand what you mean," Amanda stammered, unsure how to respond, her hands frozen on her hairbrush. Sophie's lips twisted into a small, humourless smile. "You'll see soon enough." The silence that followed was suffocating. As the weeks stretched into months, Amanda saw the toll the business took on the other models, each one fighting in their own way to stay relevant. There were good times, though. They had to be there, right? Moments when laughter filled the air, when Amanda felt like she could belong, when she shared a table at a trendy cafe after a long shoot. Emily would laugh at a joke, Sophie would take too many selfies, and for a few minutes the ugly side of the industry seemed so far away. But those moments never lasted. No one spoke about the things they all knew, the unspoken truth that lingered in every corner of the agency. It was easier to pretend they were just friends, that they were all going through the same thing, fighting the same battle. They weren't. One night, when a huge ad campaign fell through for Sophie, Amanda saw her for the first time, truly saw her. Sophie's eyes, usually bright and full of bravado, were dull now. Her shoulders slumped as she dragged herself to the couch in their shared apartment. The others stayed quiet, casting furtive glances at her, pretending to be absorbed in their own phones. "Did you hear?" Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want someone younger, more fresh. The new girl's coming in next week, you know." Amanda opened her mouth to say something, but her throat closed. She didn't know what to say, how to comfort a girl who had been so vibrant, so confident. Now, Sophie looked like a ghost of her former self. But it wasn't just Sophie who was unravelling. Emily had stopped eating, not in a dramatic, noticeable way at first, but Amanda noticed the way she would pick at her food, pushing it around on her plate before excusing herself from meals. There were the tired eyes that never seemed to rest, the way she'd snap at anyone who tried to ask her about it. Amanda could see it in the others too, the desperation, the long hours, the late nights, the clients who never really wanted to work with them, but with their bodies. The whispers, the barbs, the unspoken competition between the girls. They were all fighting, clinging to the last shred of a dream that had become a nightmare. The breaking point came one night after a brutal photo shoot. Amanda had been pushed further than ever before, her body aching from hours of posing, her face smeared with makeup that felt like it had been painted onto her skin. The photographer's voice was harsh, telling her to smile, telling her to look a certain way, another way, as if she were some doll to be dressed and undressed at their whim. When the shoot ended, she collapsed into a chair, her head spinning, barely able to keep her eyes open. Emily came over, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch Amanda's shoulder. "You okay?" she asked, but there was something in her voice. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't concern. It was almost like guilt. Amanda looked at her, confused, unsure of what she was hearing. "I'm fine," she said, but the words tasted wrong. She wasn't fine. None of them were fine. Emily's eyes flickered to the floor. "They want us to be perfect, don't they?" she said softly, more to herself than to Amanda. "But what if perfection isn't enough? What if it never is?" The time spent with the other models was a roller coaster. There were moments of fleeting friendships, of understanding and solidarity in shared pain. But those were overshadowed by the constant undercurrent of competition, jealousy, and exhaustion. Amanda started to feel the walls closing in, not just from the agency, but from the women around her too. The same women she had once seen as friends. Their faces, once full of excitement, had become just as hollow as hers. Every morning, Amanda woke up to the same routine: the scales, the measuring tape, the strict eyes of the agents. The weight on the scale was never enough, the measurements never perfect. It didn't matter if her body was already exhausted, hollowed out by late nights and early mornings. The agents would tell them to eat less, to smile more, to be thinner, sharper, cleaner. "The camera only loves what's perfectly lean," they said. "That's what they want from you." Not to talk of healthy, shitty-tasting smoothies, the barely there salads, the endless cups of black coffee to stave off hunger. The pain of hunger became something she learned to live with, like a constant, gnawing presence in her chest. She had learned to ignore it, to push it aside. But there were moments when the hunger wouldn't stay quiet. One evening, after another grueling shoot, Amanda found herself in the dressing room with the others. The air felt heavier than usual, weighed down by exhaustion and frustration. The shoot had gone on for hours, each shot pushing her further, forcing her to twist into poses that made her body ache. Emily, always the one to hide her vulnerability, looked at Amanda from across the room, her eyes dark with exhaustion. "You want to get out of here?" she asked, her voice low, careful. Amanda blinked. "Where would we go?" "Somewhere we can eat what we want, just for once." Amanda felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope. For the first time in ages, she let her guard down. The girls, who were usually nothing more than competition, suddenly became something else. Emily, Sophie, and the others. They were all tired of pretending. They sneaked out just after the agency's last call when no one would notice. They found a little diner at the edge of the city, tucked away from the glitzy streets and bright lights. The smell of greasy fries and thick, sweet milkshakes hit Amanda's nose before they even stepped inside. It was almost too much. They sat in a booth, the silence at first uncomfortable, but soon it was filled with the sound of laughter, real laughter. Sophie, who was always the loudest, picked up the menu and pretended to read it dramatically, only to slam it down in front of Amanda. "I'm getting everything," she said, grinning like a child. "Everything." Amanda stared at the menu, overwhelmed by the options. There were burgers, fries, fried chicken, milkshakes, pie. She hadn't tasted any of that in so long. The thought of it, something rich, something real, almost made her want to cry. "I don't know what I want," she admitted, her voice shaky. "Everything looks so good." Emily reached across the table, her hand warm against Amanda's. "We deserve this, okay?" she said quietly. "We've been starved in every way." The group fell into a rare, beautiful moment of togetherness, of shared rebellion, all eating food that filled them up in more ways than just the stomach. They devoured burgers and fries like it was the last meal they'd ever get to have. Amanda took a bite of a milkshake, letting the sweetness spread across her tongue, and for just a moment, she forgot about the constant weight of expectations. But as the night wore on, the laughter started to fade, and the air became heavy again. The girls, who had once been so carefree, began to quiet down, their faces turning somber. Amanda looked around, sensing a shift in the mood. Emily, who had been joking earlier, now sat with her arms crossed, her eyes lost in thought. Sophie, too, had stopped laughing. "I heard something today," Emily whispered, her voice low, barely audible above the hum of the diner. "What?" Amanda asked, leaning in closer. She could feel the tension in the air, an invisible thread pulling them closer. Emily's gaze flickered toward the window, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "Some girls, they don't leave. Not ever. Not the way we think they do." Amanda's heart skipped a beat, her body instinctively tensing. "What do you mean?" Sophie asked, her voice a little too sharp, her eyes darting nervously to Emily. Emily leaned in, her face grim. "There's more to this world than what we see. Some girls, they get taken. They think they're just doing the shoots. They think they're just following the orders, right? But they end up somewhere else." Amanda's stomach churned. What do you mean? Taken? What are you talking about? They get trafficked, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Some of them are promised big contracts, some are just girls who show up at these agencies thinking they'll make it big, but they don't. They get pushed into other things they can't say no to. They don't get to leave. They don't get to come back from it. The words hit Amanda like a punch to the gut, a suffocating truth crawling under her skin. Her chest tightened and she suddenly felt as though she couldn't breathe. Is that happening here? Amanda asked, her voice shaking. Emily nodded, her eyes shadowed. I don't know who or why or where, but some of us, we get lost. And once you're in, it's like you can't get out. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with the weight of what Emily had just revealed. Amanda's hands trembled. The room, once filled with warmth, felt suddenly cold, the air heavy with a sense of dread. But Sophie spoke then, her voice quiet, more vulnerable than Amanda had ever heard. I heard stories too. There are girls who go missing. They vanish from the shoots. Some disappear from the agencies, and no one talks about them again. Amanda felt her heart begin to race. She didn't know what to say, how to process what Emily had just told her. She looked at the other girls, her friends, and saw the same fear in their eyes. They were all trapped in the same web, the same nightmare. Only some of them didn't even realize it yet. The brief moment of rebellion, the laughter, the indulgence in food, now felt like an illusion. The truth of their world, dark and ugly, was harder to ignore. As they finished their meal in silence, the weight of the words hung between them. They couldn't unlearn what they had just discovered. The perfect world they had once tried to belong to was built on lies, manipulation, and unspeakable darkness. Amanda's stomach twisted again, but it wasn't from hunger. She had to get out. She had to find a way. But for now, all she could do was sit in the quiet, feeling the heaviness of the truth settle deep inside her, like a stone in her gut. The phone rang, and for a moment, Amanda thought it was just another call from the agency, another reminder about her next assignment. But then the name on the screen was her mother's. Her heart skipped, and she picked it up quickly, her hands shaking. "Mum?" Her voice cracked, a tightness in her throat making it hard to speak. She hadn't heard from her mum in weeks. The distance between them had grown, the separation becoming something she couldn't bear to acknowledge. "Amanda, baby, Mummy missed you." Her mum's voice was weak, strained. I have something to tell you." Her mum's words blurred as Amanda's heart pounded. Something was wrong. She could feel it, like a deep gnawing pit in her stomach. "I'm not doing well, sweetie," her mum continued, each word falling heavily. "The doctors, they said it's serious. I'm scared. I wanted to hear your voice." The words hit Amanda like a slap. Her vision blurred, the walls of the small, sterile apartment pressing in around her. She wanted to scream, to cry out. She wanted to go home, to hold her mum, to comfort her, to be there. But she knew she couldn't. She wasn't allowed to leave. Her throat tightened, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll come home. I'll be there soon. I'll help you." "No, baby. Don't worry about me, okay? I just didn't want you to hear it from Nurse Teresa." Her mum's voice faltered. Just know I'm thinking of you, always." The line clicked off and Amanda stared at the phone in her hand. She was trap-up. It was late at night when the idea struck her. She had been digging through her box, partly to find something to distract her from the gnawing thoughts in her head. And there it was, a small, nondescript device. A micro body camera. She'd bought it on a whim, thinking it might be useful one day. She had hidden it deep in her box, and until that moment she'd completely forgotten about it. Now it was her only chance. She thought about it. She weighed the risks. The agency had been thorough, checking her belongings, making sure she had no way to escape. How had they missed this? But she wasn't about to question her luck. She had to use it. Amanda's hands shook as she examined the tiny camera. It would be dangerous, yes. But without concrete evidence, no one would believe her. If she didn't risk it, if she didn't document the horror she was living through, she'd have no way out. No proof. So she made her decision. The next day, she wore it. The tiny camera nestled carefully in her cleavage, hidden beneath a loose blouse. It was the only place where she felt it might go unnoticed, tucked away just enough that they wouldn't find it. The manager summoned her to his office again, a private meeting he called it. She had grown accustomed to these by now, where he'd ask her questions about her progress, about her commitment to the job. But today, something felt different. The air felt heavier. He was waiting for her when she entered, his eyes glinting with a cold sort of pleasure. "Come in, Amanda," he said, voice too smooth. "I've been waiting for you." She stepped inside, trying to keep her expression neutral, to hide the storm of rage building inside her. He motioned for her to sit, and she did, careful not to make any sudden movements that would give away her nerves. His eyes scanned her, his gaze lingering just a little too long on her chest, a smirk tugging at his lips. Amanda felt her skin crawl, but she forced herself to keep still. "We need to have a little chat, don't we?" he said, leaning back in his chair, his fingers drumming slowly on the desk. "You've been difficult, Amanda. You need to understand how things work around here. You need to understand your place." Amanda's stomach twisted, but she held her ground. "I'm doing everything you asked." The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, I know, but I think it's time you start doing more." He leaned forward, his voice lowering, becoming something much darker. "After all, you want to be a star, don't you? You want to make it big. You're going to have to do things you don't want to do." Amanda's fingers tightened into fists in her lap, but she didn't flinch. She had to keep it together. He stood, walking slowly around the desk, his footsteps echoing in the small room. "I know you're shy, but the clients, they need something more from you. They need you to perform." Perform. The word twisted in her gut like a knife. She knew exactly what he meant. He wasn't talking about modelling. He was talking about something else entirely, something horrible. And now she had to witness it. She had to capture it. For herself. For the girl still trapped here. For the truth. As he continued speaking, his words a sickening blend of charm and threat, Amanda's mind raced. Her body ached from the effort of keeping still, keeping calm, but inside she was burning. She had to get this on camera. She had to expose them. Later that night, the client arrived. A man with slicked back hair and an air of entitlement that made Amanda's stomach churn. He had the look of someone who thought he could have anything he wanted. The manager gave Amanda a glance. "You'll do as you're told," he whispered, his eyes gleaming. Amanda nodded, trying to ignore the sickening taste in her mouth. She led the man to the room where the shoot would take place, doing everything she could to keep her body in motion, to look professional, to avoid his gaze. But he followed her every step, his eyes scanning her like an animal sizing up its prey. The camera, nestled carefully between her breasts, recorded it all, every word, every lewd suggestion, every moment of humiliation she was forced to endure. As the session wore on, the man's hands began to wander, his demands becoming more obscene. "You're a good girl, aren't you? I could make you a star," he purred, his breath hot on her neck. The manager stood at the door, watching, his arms crossed, pleased with himself like he had orchestrated some kind of twisted dance. Amanda could feel the camera against her chest, the tiny device silently capturing it all. This was her only chance. The night was long. The hours felt like days. But Amanda stayed calm. She let them talk, let them say whatever they wanted. She had it all on tape. She just had to make it out alive. The air was heavy in the blacked-out van as it rumbled down the empty streets, the road ahead blurry under the dim lights. Amanda's hands were clenched tightly in her lap, fingers digging into her jeans, nails biting into her skin. Every inch of her felt like it was on fire, her heart thumping so loudly she thought it would burst out of her chest. She couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think clearly. She had no idea where they were taking her. She didn't want to know. Her throat felt tight, every breath an effort. But she couldn't let fear paralyze her. She had hidden the camera deep inside her, tucked in the only place the agency wouldn't think to search, the one place they wouldn't expect. It was the only way she could gather the evidence she needed, the only way to expose them. It had to be now, or it would never happen. The van pulled into the dark parking lot of the airport, the headlights sweeping across the tarmac. Amanda felt a strange chill settle over her, like she was walking into the belly of a beast she couldn't escape. The men were silent as they led her through the terminal, their grip firm on her arms, their eyes scanning the crowd for anyone who might question them. Amanda's heart raced. She knew they wouldn't want to make a scene. The airport was too public, too many eyes. But she also knew the agency was ruthless. They would do whatever it took to keep things quiet. They approached a small, secluded gate. The client, whoever he was already waiting, an empty smile on his face, his eyes cold. The men nudged Amanda forward, her legs heavy, each step dragging her closer to a fate she didn't understand but feared nonetheless. Then, as they passed a security checkpoint, something inside Amanda snapped. It was now or never. She didn't think. She just ran. Without a second thought, she twisted away from their grip and sprinted towards the nearest security desk. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her heart thundering in her ears, but her legs pushed harder, faster. She had to get to them. She had to make them listen. Behind her, she heard the men shouting, their heavy footsteps thundering in pursuit, but Amanda kept her eyes locked on the security officer ahead. She reached the counter in seconds, her voice barely audible as she gasped for air. "Please, they're trafficking me. I need help. They're from a modelling agency. Please, you have to believe me." The officer looked at her, his face unreadable, but then he saw the fear in her eyes, the raw desperation, and something shifted. He nodded quickly and radioed for backup. Amanda didn't wait to see if they'd come. She had already done enough. The men behind her stopped, eyes darting nervously between each other. But they were too late. The agency's men tried to stop her, but the evidence was already in the hands of the right people. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected Amanda to fight back. They had underestimated her. As the security team quickly surrounded the men, Amanda's heart hammered in her chest. She had done it. The camera, hidden deep inside her, had captured everything. The clients, the deals, the abuse, the threats. All of it was there. All of it was recorded. The agency could run, could flee. But it wouldn't matter. They had been exposed. Amanda thought of the other girls, Sophie, Emily, Lena. They were all still trapped, still suffering, still being used. But Amanda had given them a chance. The investigation was swift. The evidence Amanda had gathered, video footage, photos, was irrefutable. The agency's operations, their trafficking network, their abuse, it was all out in the open. The government couldn't turn a blind eye. They couldn't ignore the mountain of evidence that Amanda had provided. Within weeks, the agency was shut down. The men behind it were arrested, and for the first time, the world saw the ugly truth of what happened behind closed doors in the modelling industry. The girls were rescued, all of them. Amanda couldn't stop crying when she saw them, when she knew they were safe, when she knew they could start to rebuild. The government provided therapy, counselling, a way out for all of them. Slowly they began to heal.